and I went to the wrong schools. I don't know. Okay, so, yep. Good morning, Danvers, and happy birthday, America. Today is June 17th, 2026, and we are rapidly approaching July 4th, 2026, which is the 250th year birthday of America and the Declaration of Independence. It's a great document. It's the foundation. The Declaration of Independence is the foundation of our Constitution. Although the first Constitution was the Articles of Confederation when we started, but it wasn't working too good. The states were fighting, so they came out with the Constitution, and it leveled the playing field between the feds and the states, and it created the Bill of Rights that said the feds can't touch these things, and they've been touching them ever since because they've been lying to us all along. There's always been people that are fighting against our Constitution and our American freedoms and our way of life. There is no DNA test to be an American. You just got to love freedom and work together. You know, we're all individuals. We're all responsible for each other. But when something happens, we're the melting pot. We all come together and fight the foes and then go back to our business. But unfortunately, we have leaders now that have lost the spirit of America. They cry, oh, Donald Trump is ruining democracy. Well, we don't have a democracy to begin with. So, I mean, let's just get that right out of the way. No, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, a constitutional republic, a representative constitutional republic. Okay? So, yeah, we have a democratic form of voting, but that's where the end of democracy goes, because if you go and you really read about the founding fathers, you will see, I have a 23-minute video that's going to go over a whole bunch of stuff about the founding fathers, okay? Not a whole bunch, because there's just so much. Our history is so rich, and we've been lied to so much. This one will focus on slavery and Christianity, this video. And it's from the Founding Fathers. Now, this book was written in 1991, The Myth of Separation of Church and State, by David Barton. And him and his son are world-class historians, and they're going to be, they are the 23-minute video, along with Andrew Womack, who is a minister who will be interviewing them about all the documents and everything about America. We need to, if we don't know our history, we're going to lose it, okay? So that's why I do this, and we should be celebrating. I live in Danvers, and apparently I talked to people, and Danvers has no scheduled events or celebration for America 250 years. There's nothing. Crickets. So again, where's our priorities and what's going on? Well, I can tell you what our priorities are. Propaganda. From Hollywood to the media and everything else, they've been lying to us. The Federalist Papers tell us how we're supposed to be running our government, and the propagandists are lying, and lying some more. So, okay, I'm going to back off and go to the good news, because that's what we usually do in the beginning, right? that was my opening salvo at the opening of the show. It's June 17th, 2026, and yeah, this is episode, well, what do I call this now? Season 33, episode 4. I missed 2 months because June is the 6th month, and I've only done 4 shows, so I missed 2 because I'm slowing down, and someone's going to have to take over for the Voice of Freedom in Danvers. I don't know. Okay, but at any rate, like I started off in saying, the separation of church and state. It's such a misused phrase, and people actually think it's in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights. No, it was in a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Church Association, and all it said was, yes, there is a wall of separation from church and state, but it's that the state can't interfere with the church, can't tell the church what to do, can't get in the church's business. The church is the church, and you can exercise your religious freedoms until your religious freedoms interfere with someone else's. Okay, so that's how rights and freedoms work. Okay, and the lie is the lie, saying that, oh, you can't have any church matters in the state. Bingo, wrongo. And again, the 23-minute video will kind of highlight some of that erroneous stupidity. God have mercy on us. And he does. He blesses us every day, and that's it. That's the only thing that keeps me going. Otherwise, I'd be a wreck like everyone else. But everything's in God's hands. Even when you think about, all the doomsayers about, climate change is going to kill us. Global warming, all this, all that. We're all going to die. But the New York Post just had an article saying that, it's really not that bad, and they've been scaring you. They didn't come out and say that, but yeah, we're not going to use the doom and gloom scare, end of the world doomsday scenario models, okay? So they're not using that anymore, because I believe the end of the world will come, and it will have nothing to do with mankind's carbon footprint or nuclear bombs or anything else. It's all going to be as predicted in the Bible by the good Lord himself. And so there's nothing we can do to prevent it, stop it. We just got to keep doing good until God comes back. Jesus, the God of Abraham, Moses, Jacob, and Isaac. That God, the I am of I am in the Bible. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, and let's just put a picture 5 real quick for a second, and then we're going to go right to the video. Jesus is the light of the world. There's a whole biblical verse, this painting that we got here. Jesus knocking on the door. That door is supposed to represent the heart, as the human heart. As you can see, there's no door handle on the door. So Jesus can't come into your life and come into your heart unless you open the door. We have to open the door to let Jesus in. We have to make that decision. And so Jesus is the light of the world. And the good news that he came and spread with his disciples from his short 33-year time on earth is that he came, he died for our sins, and he wants to meet us at the cross so we can confess our sins and accept salvation and God's gift of salvation. So without further ado, let's just go right into the tape, and then we'll talk about that tape. David Barton, go ahead.
Edition of Gospel Truth with Andrew Womack. On today's broadcast, Andrew is joined by David and Tim Barton as they discuss the history of Christian liberty in America. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Gospel Truth. I am now interviewing David and Tim Barton from Wall Builders Ministry, and they are just a tremendous resource on American history, and we're doing this in celebration of the 250th anniversary of this nation, and we're going back and straightening out a lot of the things that have been said, a lot of misinformation that has been given about our nation, and I tell you, this is super beneficial. So we're doing this for a 2-week period on my program, interviewing David and Tim Barton from Wall Builders. So we're going to go right back into that interview and pick up where we left off.
If you don't know what the Bible actually says and don't know the truth, you can get in some really bad practices. And America has become a very secular nation as a result of absolute untruths, because we didn't get this in school, we weren't taught this, and we didn't seek it out for ourselves.
Well, and one of the things the Founding Fathers did to try to make sure we wouldn't become secular is part of what's on the table here in front of us, which I do want to go through some of these, because this right here is a great example. When people talk about Jefferson or Franklin and they say, well, those guys weren't really religious, and I want to contrast it and say, okay, so tell me about John Witherspoon. I don't know who that is. Oh, okay, well, interesting you don't, because John Witherspoon was actually a pastor at the time he signed the Declaration. He was a pastor that had been recruited to come to America from Scotland. He was part of the Scottish Enlightenment, the Scottish Great Awakening happening before the American Revolution. He was a Presbyterian pastor. He'd been recruited by some alumni from Princeton, which was a Presbyterian school. And back then, every university had to have a pastor to be the president of the university. And they needed a new pastor, and some of the alumni had heard about this incredible minister over in Scotland, John Witherspoon. So he gets recruited by other founding fathers to come to America. He comes to be the president of Princeton. He runs their theological seminary. He runs the local church there in the area. Active pastor at the time he signs. Once we get through the Revolution, and actually some of the laws change when we're no longer subject to Great Britain's laws. One of the laws under the kings of England is we were not allowed to print Bibles in the English language in America. We had to import all of our Bibles. But once we separate from Great Britain, many founding fathers recognized we need to have more Bibles in America if we're going to remain free. Because if we don't have this religious and moral foundation, it won't work. John Witherspoon is responsible for this Bible. It was considered a family Bible because it was large enough that a family could gather around a table and read it together. What is interesting about it is...
See how small it is compared to that? Hard for family to get around and read that.
Yeah.
So in the front of the Bible, traditionally, it would say what translation it is, and there's something conspicuously missing. This is a King James translation, but King James is not there. And part of the thought was because it would be prideful and arrogant for someone to put their name on the Holy Word of God. King James didn't come up with this. God came up with this. And John Witherspoon actually wrote the introduction for people to understand some of the background and context of the Bible. But the reason, again, this matters is people often learn about the founding fathers through this very small lens of they weren't really religious. And even the ones we think weren't religious were far more religious than we realize. But most people have no idea that many of them were actually ministers, that they'd been chaplains in the military, or were actually pastors at the time, or had been trained from the ministry, some level of profession from the universities they went to. And so part of what they did is they began printing Bibles, and there's actually several Bibles we can go through in a second. I'll let you lead the way on this. But the only reason Americans today believe we have some kind of secular foundation is because we don't know who the founding fathers were, and we don't know their stories anymore.
And, well, he's just a preacher. No, this is the man most responsible for the economic clauses in the Constitution. He was the great economist as well. And so he is a very schooled, great guy, but nobody ever knows his name. Same thing.
He's also the guy who personally trained more founding fathers than any other single individual or any other single university. So even when you get to the guys who are at the Constitution, he's the one that had the most influential voice on the largest group of the people that are there. And there's actually been some great things. People can look online. Easy, steady. Who did John Witherspoon influence in early America? What founding fathers did he influence? And
isn't there a guy named James Madison or something?
It is staggering the people that went to school under his leadership, that sat through his classes, and it literally is founding fathers, it's members of Congress, members of the Senate, it's U.S. presidents, Supreme Court justices. I mean, it's staggering the people that were influenced by him.
And this isn't only our founding documents, but I mean all of the universities, Harvard, Yale, everything. They were divinity schools.
They were, every one of them.
And you had to go to chapel or you would be kicked out.
It would not be dissimilar to what happens at Charis, where if you want to study business, you can, but you're going to have to go through a couple years of Bible first. That's exactly what their universities were. And this is not to disparage Charis at all, but they had to go through it in Greek and some little Hebrew and Latin.
Praise God. Praise God, I don't have to do that. I can barely speak English. Could we get into the Declaration,
yes, sir,
specifically talking about Jefferson and some of the things he did? Because again, his original draft of that shows that things contrary to what people think.
So, and there's a lot more that if we can get back to, we will, and if not, maybe later this week we can.
But I just didn't want to miss this.
Exactly right.
And this might be a little awkward sorry for our camera team. Hopefully you can get it and there's not too much of a glare. Let me see. I don't know how we're going to open it. they'll fix it somehow. Maybe post, they're going to figure it out. So the original draft was a 4-page document, and this is the first printing of the original draft. And so this is where you have on the first page, it's a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America. The second paragraph, what most people know, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The first page is where Jefferson lays out the political philosophy of the nation.
And this is his handwriting, by the way. This is what he did. It took him 17 days to create this.
So this is the first printing?
No, this is the first draft of the Declaration that was first printed.
Yeah, so, this is the first printing of the original draft. So after Jefferson died and his original draft was found, they said, we should make copies of it. So this is from the first printing that the first copies made. This is one of those first copies.
So this is about 200 years old, this copy.
So the second page, he starts listing grievances. Third page, he lists grievances. Fourth page is where he wraps up the political philosophy. But the original draft, there's only 24 grievances. The final draft, there were 27. In this one, the last grievance, it's nearly half of the third page.
Now, let me show you real quick over here on this part, because here's a grievance of 3 lines, here's a grievance of 3 lines, here's a grievance of 3 lines, here's a grievance of 2 lines, all short stuff.
So most grievances are 1 or 2 or 3 lines. This is nearly half of the third page. And it was a grievance against the slave trade, arguing for the humanity of all that were enslaved, and people can look this up online, so that you can online go look it up. You can go to National Archives, you can get a high-res image, and you can read either in cursive or it'll have text for you. You can read the text. It starts off, this is one of the grievances why we wanted to separate from the king, and Jefferson actually spent more time on this one than any other one. And it was the king. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating his most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. It's talking about the slave trade. That the king is doing the slave trade, he's about to add some context. He said, this piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, the word infidel is underlined. Piratical warfare is the warfare of pirates, and infidel pirates are non-believing pirates. Well, he's actually referring to a very specific group of people. Those were the Muslim pirates, the Barbary pirates of North Africa. And he's saying, the king is doing what the Muslim pirates are doing, and
the king's supposed to be a Christian king.
Well, and then this is, hang on, this is where we're going, because it says the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. So the word Christian, this is the first word that is not in cursive, and it's underlined. So the king says he's a Christian. He's doing what
like
the Muslim pirates.
He's a Christian king.
He's doing what the Muslim pirates are doing, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. The word men is fully capitalized. And this is the third page. So we've already gone through the second paragraph on the first page. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. The reason this matters, the largest grievance in the original draft, the one Jefferson said he thought was the most important, was a grievance not just arguing against the slave trade, it was arguing for the humanity of all that were enslaved. And the grievance goes on. There's a lot more even to it. But the reason it matters is the prevailing narrative today by the founding fathers is they were all evil because they were these incredible racist guys. And it's incorrect.
Before you hit that, let me throw one fact in here that's kind of interesting, is he did that grievance because they've been trying for at that point 6 years to end the slave trade in colonies across America, and the king keeps vetoing all. So we've been trying to get out of the slave trade for years.
So it was against the law to do away with slavery.
Which is why it's a grievance.
So there were I think there were 3 colonies that had been able to successfully do it. There were 4 colonies that had tried, and those had been vetoed. But all of them had fought opposition with the king because he said, "You're British colonies. The slave trade is part of what the British Empire does."
Am I correct in saying that the king owned a large portion of the slave trade? He was making a lot of money off of it.
Coming to the empire is absolutely correct. Yeah. So whether it was the king himself or the lords and nobles, but the empire is benefiting significantly from the slave trade. Right. And that's why he was saying, you can't arbitrarily be part of our empire and stop our slave trade.
So one of the criticisms against these founding fathers is that they owned slaves.
Right.
And yet many of them, if I'm not mistaken, you guys correct me, I think Washington was like 10 years old when he was given his first slave. They grew up in this, and it was against the law to outlaw it, and so it was just what they inherited.
Yes.
They're trying to outlaw it, and they're griping the king won't let us.
Well, and at least outlaw the slave trade initially, and what's worth noting about this is when people say the founding fathers were evil, that they argue it as if they were uniquely evil for doing this. And one of the questions I like to ask people is, can you name any political leaders, anybody in the world at that time that had money and power that didn't have slaves. And I'm just going to wait for you. Because this wasn't something that was being done in America. This is something that's being done in the world.
Again, if people knew the Bible, they could go back to Exodus and see that the Israelites were slaves.
Genesis, right? Joseph is sold by his brothers to slave traders in Egypt, which is Africa. There was a slave trade in Africa in Genesis. So this is not a new thing, but where I would counter the modern narrative is, can you name political leaders, the first ones? When's the first time you can identify political leaders actually took legal and political steps against the institution of slavery? It's the Founding Fathers. Yep. Nobody was doing this before the Founding Fathers were. And then to go further, when most people think, well, they all owned slaves. First of all, they didn't all own slaves. But secondly, the majority of the ones that had slaves, actually, many of them, because of the revolution, they realized as they're fighting for their own freedom, you know what? We need to kind of change our position on some of this and move to offering freedom for those that are enslaved. John Jay is a great example. John Jay was the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He was one of the co-authors of the Federalist Papers, the reason the Constitution becomes ratified and adopted as our governing document. John Jay was a slave owner, and there's two great letters from him, one in 1776, one in 1778. The first one in 76, he wrote to somebody, and he says, "It's occurring to me the hypocrisy of my position, that I'm fighting for my own freedom while I'm enslaving others." In 1778, he says, many people are now becoming aware of the inconsistency of the position, that they can't fight for their own freedom and maintain that we're freedom people if we're enslaving others. The reason it matters, John Jay goes from owning slaves, and because of fighting for freedom, recognizing this isn't right, we shouldn't be doing this, not only does he free his slaves, he becomes the founder of the New York Abolition Society. And this is, again, where I would say, if we just knew more of their stories, the majority of the Founding Fathers actually came out against slavery, and many of them did end up freeing their slaves. We just don't know those narratives and stories today.
And if I'm not mistaken, that clause in the Declaration, wasn't it like 10 or 11 of the colonies supported it?
Yeah, Georgia and South Carolina said, well, we've never tried to ban the slave trade, so you can't put it in there, because John Hancock said, we're only putting in stuff that everybody agrees on. All 13 have to agree on it. And South Carolina and Georgia said, well, we've never tried to ban it. But you know what's significant?
So all but two of the colonies were supportive of
11
that.
Voted in favor of that grievance, which, again, it's the vast majority of Founding Fathers that are very supportive of the abolition movement. Now, there's nuance about whether it was immediate or gradual. It doesn't matter, because they're the first ones doing this anywhere in the world. And so instead of saying they're really bad for not doing it, they're leading the world and doing something that nobody else is doing in the world at that time. Not only that many of them are freeing their slaves, but actually once we separate from Great Britain, every single northern colony began passing laws, not just outlawing the slave trade, but also for the abolition of all that were enslaved.
And could you also fill in the blanks on this? But when they put in the Constitution, there was something about 20 years before they would abandon it, and it was because they wanted unity among the colonies.
What happened,
that's when they had that watch night service.
What happened with the Constitution is, again, South Carolina and Georgia, they haven't tried to ban slavery, but they all recognize that it's going to be on its way out. And they said, okay, we'll address it. We'll let Congress address it 20 years from now. And so the Constitution done in 78, and January the 1st, 2008, which is, they did the Constitution in 1787. Excuse me. They did the Constitution in 1787. So 20 years, January the 1st of 1808 is when you can ban the slave trade. So Jefferson started...
And let me back up, because it's also worth noting...
It's interesting to watch you guys. I would like to be at Thanksgiving dinner with you.
Well, we're saying the slave trade, but strategically, the guys who are there in the abolition side, they're trying to find common ground, because they know we need to be... If we are not united, then this won't work. So we have to find common ground. And so if we end slavery outright, some of these southern colonies won't join us. But what they strategically did, there is no mention of slave or slavery or slave trade in the Constitution. So when we're saying that they said, well, you can't end the slave trade for 20 years, that is correct for their argument, but strategically the Constitution says there can be no prevention of the importation of individuals in the colony prior to January 1st, 1808. That's constitutional language, but that was intentional because they didn't want to diminish what they thought was a beautiful document with something as evil as slaves or slavery in that institution. And so, again, just like recognizing the anti-slavery nature of the Constitution, the fact that they don't even use that word in there also shows the influence of the abolitionists as they're working to stop it.
And I would point to that, people like to look back and beat up on the founding fathers of slavery. So put in context, once we're an independent nation, by 1804, every northern state had passed a law that put slavery on a road to being ended. The South did not do that until after the Civil War, 1865, or at the end of the Civil War, 1865, with the 13th Amendment. So had it been up to the northern states, we would have been the first nation in the world to end slavery.
I think I'm also correct to say that on January the 1st, 1808, they did ban the import.
They did ban the importation.
They didn't outlaw what was already here, but they took steps to
We'll have
limit
no
it.
more coming in. And Jefferson had been working on that 2 years before that. He was excited to be able to work on it because he wrote he wrote that anti-slavery part of the Declaration.
Yeah.
So he really wanted. But and we'll come back to the history part in a minute. I just want everybody to understand that at the time America did ban slavery in 1865, there's 128 nations in the world. We're now number 4. So we're at the top end, even in 1865, of banning slavery.
But we even beat Britain as far as 1808 when we banned the import.
So when it was signed, Jefferson signed the ban on the slave trade on March 2nd, 1807. It doesn't go into effect until January 1st of next year. England signed it about 3 weeks later, March 25th, 1807. It goes into effect when it's signed, and so people go, well, England beat us. And I would say, hang on a second. Read the law that was signed, because England says for any ships that have contracts, you have 1 year to fulfill all your contracts and then no more. So even though their law went into effect before ours, we signed ours first, theirs went into effect first. However, theirs didn't fully end it till after ours
They
did.
had a grandfather clause for another year that let it keep going.
But so either way, both of those we would point out were the influence of Christians in those nations.
That's right.
Because again, the influence of Christianity in America, you pick any evil or atrocity that you want to when people want to criticize America, and I'll always ask the question, who were the people that led the opposition movement? And if it ever stopped, if it ever changed, who were the leaders in changing it? It was always Christians and pastors in the church, which actually, going back to the founding fathers, this is, again, we can go through the fact that this is another Bible from one of the founding fathers. This is another Bible from one of the founding fathers. This was, if you want to highlight this one real quick.
This one is Benjamin Rush, one of the 3 top founding fathers, according to John Adams, gave a dozen reasons we would never take the Bible out of schools in America. So this one is public schools. He's called the father of public schools under the Constitution. Dozen reasons we'll never take the Bible out.
And he says if we ever get to the point that we remove the Bible, he says, I lament we will spend so much time and money in punishing crimes when we will have taken so little pains to prevent them.
Yeah.
And we see it today. Well, that's what they knew. If we ever remove a biblical foundation, this nation won't work. And that was what you quoted earlier from John Adams, and it's a great letter he writes to the militia of Massachusetts. I think it's 1798 when he writes the letter.
1798.
And it's like a 5-paragraph letter. It's super easy to read. The most famous line is where he says, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. But the reason was, this was a nation birthed on giving freedom to people. But freedom only works if you have a moral foundation, and they knew that moral foundation comes from Christianity and the Bible, which when they say religion and morality, religion was Christianity, morality was the Bible. So without Christianity and the Bible, this experiment doesn't work, which actually is what this is about too.
So this is George Washington's final address after 45 years in office, considered the most significant political speech ever given by any president. This is what kids literally studied in school for generations afterwards. And in here, Washington, summing up his years, he said, of all the dispositions and habits that lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports.
And I wrote a thing just last month, and I was quoting a guy from 2011 who was a Harvard professor, and he had a guy from China in one of his classes. And you may know this. And he asked this guy, can you tell anything? What has surprised you? And he said, I am shocked at how much religion plays a part of your democracy. Yes. And he said, especially in times past, even people that weren't Christians were influenced by Christianity. Right. And he was saying the exact same thing, that this is the restraining influence. And if you remove that, You can't put enough policemen in, to guard schools and metal detectors. Christianity was the restraint.
It was
on ungodliness.
And we didn't even really get into it. Maybe we will more tomorrow. The fact that the reason we have the separation of powers, the reason we have the three branches of government, we didn't go through specific things in our Constitution, but we can, where founding fathers can directly point to the biblical understanding they had to lead us to doing some very significant and unique things in the American Constitution that were directly the influence of Christianity, and the fact that even the founding fathers all acknowledged this only happened because God, it was a providence of God. It was as if the finger of God was helping us write this document. God has always been part of this nation, and every time our nation's gone the wrong direction, it's been because people have rejected biblical truth.
Absolutely.
And every time we recover that, often through these great awakening moments, it's because God is waking up Christians and churches and pastors to say, let's go back and renew some of this biblical foundation. And the more we renew it, the more hope there is for the future of this nation.
Psalms 36:1, the transgression of the wicked says within my heart that there is no fear of God before his eyes. And when you lose the fear of God that comes from knowing what God's standards are, then you lose the restraint on evil. And so anyway, let me just advertise this before we leave. We're going to continue this on our programs, and we're going to continue throughout the week. But we've got CDs and DVDs that were taken from the programs, and so the exact things that you've heard David and Tim talking about are on there. This is a USB that will have both the audio and the video on there. And then also, I encourage you to go to wallbuilders.com. You guys have a slew of material there, and anything that you have that they've touched on that is interest to you, you can go to wallbuilders.com, and I can guarantee you can get more about this. And we need to know this, not only for yourself, but this would be good for you to teach your children. It would be great for you to bring this to your church and just start sharing with people, because it's the truth that sets people free, but it's only the truth you know that sets you free. What we don't know is killing us. And so praise God. Thank you guys for being with us.
Yes,
this
sir.
has been awesome. And so we're going to continue to do this. The rest.
Welcome back. Again, I just can't emphasize this enough. Benjamin Franklin said it in the beginning, and it still rings true today. It's a republic if you can keep it. And I just add to that and say, you can't keep it if you don't know what it is. And the history of this country is so rich in morals and religious principles and Christian principles, morals, and it's amazing. It's surprising. And what we haven't learned, and what the infamous, educational institutions fail to teach us. Everybody used to know what George Washington's, final address was, and there were 4 clear warnings, and we're violating all the warnings. They don't teach that anymore. In fact, in some college things, you can see that when they when they printed in the books that they removed George Washington's warnings because they were too precise and accurate for what's happening today. And so we're celebrating the Declaration of Independence, and as you can see, it's a whole different ballgame what was going on with the slavery and the thoughts of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, Thomas Jefferson and John Jay and everyone finally came to the conclusion, we're fighting for our freedom, and look at what we're doing to our own people here. So they were on the leading edge. They were the progressive ones of the time. They were fighting the king to end slavery. Just like today, all the progressives, they want to stop racism and stop all this stuff. But the SPLC, boggles my mind. The Southern Poverty Law Center. I talk to people all the time about this stuff, and people that I know and love and are on top of all. They said, what? The Southern Poverty Law Center is what? They've been charged with paying the KKK and all the racist hate groups, white supremacists and all. You go find it. Because it's the capitalist model, as they tell them. Racism has gone down. It's gone away. It's in the corners. The light has shone. When God and people shine the light on all this racism and hatred, it goes away. David Duke and his followers they're the ones under the rock. But that doesn't do good for the fearmongers who want to keep people afraid and scared, and they need the crisis. So the Southern Poverty Law Center has been paying these white supremacist groups to keep going and have rallies, and they even pay for cross burnings and everything else. It's all in the document, but nobody even knows it. Because why? Because they're not reporting it. The media doesn't report it. It's not on TV. It's not on radio. If a conservative did one thing wrong, it would look like, okay, let's put up picture number 2. This is what it looks like. Okay, it just boggles my mind. It just boggles my mind when they've been investigating Trump for years, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. As you can see, our in-depth reporting this has unearthed evidence of some right-wing extremism, and they're digging holes, trying to find something. They're just trying to find something to hang on Trump and the conservatives. Meanwhile, the left-wing extremism is the monster, is the boogeyman that we should be afraid of, and that's the SPLC right there, creating lies and fear. They create the lies, create the fear, but they ignore that. Okay, you can take it down, because that's the narrative. That's the lie. And if I don't even know how to recoup everything that we've talked about here, but we've got to remember our roots and what's happening. I mean, just listening to what they talked about, slavery was a worldwide thing. Everybody did it. It started in biblical times. And it was the founding fathers who came up and said, oh, I think we're hypocrites. We shouldn't do this. And John Jay, once they went through, and he was the guy who wrote the Federalist Papers. He knows more than anybody else. These guys were geniuses. They weren't just specialists. You know, you go to a specialist, and you go to the doctor, and they go to specialists. Everybody's specialized now, but the founding fathers and most farmers and most people that work with their hands, they're one-stop do-it-all. They did it all. They were ministers, they were farmers, they were what do you call them? Accountants and economists. They ran the economy, and George Washington said, we don't need professional legislators and leaders. The people need to go in, do their duty, and get out. And what's happening here in Massachusetts and in this country is nothing short of pathetic. These career politicians have ruined this country. They've ruined it. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they go in as paupers and they come out as millionaires. They lie, cheat, and steal to take care of themselves. They're not public servants. They're self-servants. They're all self-serving. Well, no. You can't use the words all and never. There are a few that are really good and are for we the people. We the people. But the others are for they themselves. Okay? Yeah, that's their pronouns. Me, myself, and I. What can I do for me, myself, and I? Give me some. That's why the corruption is so pathetic. I mean, the iceberg has been lifted. We've talked about this. I don't know how many times. The corruption from all these career politicians. They take all this money and they send it out to somewhere. Then they get a 10-20% kickback, and then the money goes to all their friends and relatives. Just look at the model in Minnesota. It's happening here in Massachusetts too. All this has been exposed. It's been highlighted and exposed in the news. And again, does anyone ever get arrested and go to jail for these crimes? No. Congress, senators, and congressional representatives, because there's two houses, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate. Beacon Hill. They lie. And if you lie to them, it's a felony and you go to jail. But they lie 25 times a day because they just obfuscate what's really happening here. and it's just a shame. It's a shame, it's a shame. And we all better wake up before it's too late. I don't know what more I can say about any of this stuff, because it looks like, we need to, try to remember what we're celebrating. 250 years of a nation. This is an experiment that most countries, like everyone's screaming for socialism and communism. Well, socialism and communism was invented in the 1900s, and it's dead and dying. In every place they have socialism and communism, they're trying to get into America because they don't, it is so oppressive and so dehumanizing and so violent. Communism has killed more people in the name of communism in the 20th century than any war. Millions upon millions. I think the count was 12 million, from the Russian communists to the Chinese communists, and you pick the communist, Pol Pot, all those guys in the Vietnam and Saigon or wherever the heck they were. Millions upon millions of people have been killed in the name of, they had the movie The Killing Fields. They just kill them. You don't, here in America, the socialists and the communists, if you don't do what they say, they dox you and they cancel you and they do that. But when the real true communist comes in, you're in the camp or you go into the electric chair, one or the other, you're dead. That's how communism really works. And again, because people don't understand the history of what a country is and what forms of government work and what don't, and what the founding fathers set up here, that's what we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate it hard, people, because we need to learn. In fact, I thought it was interesting where they brought up that Thomas Jefferson wrote the draft of the Declaration of Independence, which I have in my hand right here, and it was only 24 items of, the king has a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all in direct object to the establishment and absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. So every violation of rights that the king has done starts out with, he has refused. He has refused his assent. He has refused to pass laws. He has forbidden his governors. He has dissolved representative houses. He has refused for a long time to listen to the people. And it just goes on and on. And so there was 24 of them, but in the first draft. This one here is the one that jumps out at me. And so I will read this one here. It says, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent them hither, swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance. And that's what exactly is happening with these state and federal mandates. That they create these offices like these, like the Department of Education that was created, and they have this multi-billion-dollar budget that all the people that work and support the Department of Education are very well paid, but they give, they get the cashews and the good nuts, and the states and the local get peanuts for money. So the whole concept by Trump and people who have tried before to dissolve the Department of Education is so that all that money goes to the schools, to the states, and the schools and the states, and not to some bureaucrat pontificating on high. That's again, we got too many people working in the government. We got to streamline the government. We, the people, need to be represented more fairly. Again, case in point. We voted, 70% of the voters, 72% in this state voted for an audit. And Beacon Hill, our leaders that we elect and represent say, yeah, you really can't look at that. You can't audit our books because we're crooks. If you do that, we're going to get caught. Really? We get audited every year. It's called tax you know, April 15th. You got to file your taxes, and if you miss something, don't worry, they'll be knocking at your door. They go down to the dollars. These people are losing millions, if not billions of dollars in fraud and corruption, and we have independent journalists that have highlighted this, but nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. I don't believe. How does this happen? Because we got career criminals, and then of course James Comey and all Clapper and all those other people in the FBI that were corrupt, and it's the whole DOJ. You know, you can't beat a corrupt cop because they get you all the time. I mean, look what happened to Karen, whatever her name was. Just in this, you know, they said that she ran over her husband, the cop, whatever. You know, all those cops, you know, stick together. You know, they get caught in a lie, and they you know, but just a few bad apples don't make the bushel bad. We you know, I support our law enforcement, and we need to police ourselves and get rid of the bad apples. That's all. That's all we're asking. You don't need to abolish ICE. Just if there are bad people, get rid of the bad people. But they're not. I mean, the protesters are not really protesters, constitutionally wise, because it says to peaceably assemble, and they are not peaceably assembling. They are not peaceably assembling. Therefore, they're not covered by the First Amendment. No way, Jose. No, they're not, because they are not peaceably assembling. Peaceably assembling, you stand there and hold a sign. Learn your history, folks. What's the difference between a protest, a riot, and peaceably assembling? Okay. All right, we're going to have to get video number 2 tied up. Okay, again, I talked about the SPLC, and I just want you to know that, you know, we're being lied to, and you're going to have to wake up and smell the tyranny and what's actually happening here. The SPLC was paying racists to stay alive and come out from under your rocks, because we need you. We need a boogeyman to scare everyone, so they'll give us money and they'll vote for all the progressives and not the evil white supremacist Republicans, because that's what they do. They pay people to make Republicans and conservatives look bad. Whenever you're ready, let her rip.
SPLC, with their $750 million endowment, if you said anything that they don't like, they put you on a hate list, and then they called you an extremist and blasted it on every liberal network. You oppose illegal immigration? Extremist. Moms for Liberty? You insurrectionist, danger to America. Can't have those moms having an opinion now, can we? Classic Democrat pro-women power movement, right? Even me, Carl Higbie. Horrible. I'm the worst, apparently. By the way, wasn't horrible 15 years ago. Only when I went to work for the Trump administration did they publish that stuff. Wonder why they haven't weighed in on Graham Plattner yet. But we will in just a second. The actual SS tattooed wannabe guy, with all that money raised on being the tip of the spear in fighting hate and racism, their words, not mine. According to this new indictment, the SPLC paid people to attend extremist rallies. They even paid them to host the rallies, growing existing chapters for racism, and when there weren't enough chapters in the area, in their hate maps, they paid people to create new chapters. They recruited individuals. They even donated to extremist leaders. Can you imagine sitting there right now, being an SPLC donor, and being like, hey, you know what? I went to this fundraiser, and I'm going to help fight racism, or whatever they made you believe at that fundraiser. And now this new indictment pops up, and pow! Turns out they gave like 10 times your entire donation to a Klansman to act more Klanny. A leftist group that proclaimed itself the sole judge and jury of who and what was a hate group was literally paying the Klan to burn crosses. I mean, bravo. Making America less racist, one cross and hood at a time. What'd you like, how did you guys get caught? What, did you go to Ace Hardware and like buy some 2x4s and then like log it in your QuickBooks as like cross for burning, hoods for wearing? They were paying to create racist paraphernalia. Could they have purchased the tiki torches that made headline news like the worst thing since the Japanese internment camps? I mean, maybe at this point. They paid living expenses for their instigators to travel all over the country and establish themselves in these communities. They paid $1.2 million. All these people in this indictment are all labeled like code names. This is F9. $1 million to a guy, F9, who was in a romantic relationship with an SPLC employee. It gets even worse. The KKK is bad, but it's, according to the SPLC, it's good to pay $70K to the Aryan Nations leader, okay, $155K to the former chair of the Neo-Nazi National Alliance. I'm sure it was because he was so reformed, though, right? Here's the good stuff. Remember why Biden said he ran for president?
I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017.
Happened after 2 p.m., so he actually had a lid, so he got the reruns the next day. But turns out the SPLC paid someone $300 grand to gin that whole thing up. Who knew? I mean, we all called it at the time. We were called conspiracy theorists. $19K for someone who was a convicted felon to go burn another cross. $350K for the Aryan Nations Motorcycle Club. It's a ton of money. I mean, for the love of God, this is all insane. And while this is socially, morally, and politically unacceptable, it's not illegal. Where the DOJ actually got them was on 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of false statements to federally insured banks, and 1 count of conspiracy to conceal money laundering. They got caught by not only lying to us, their donors, and everybody else. Actually, that was legal. They got nabbed on lying to the banks about how the money was being moved around and what it was for.
He loves the...
Okay, again, we really need to find out where we're getting our news from. There's an old computer saying garbage in, garbage out. So if you're just listening to the narrative of the mainstream media and the beautiful people like Robert De Niro, I mean, again, the Hollywood propaganda, these people, I do want to say that, there are people like Candace Owens and, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Specifically, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the reports have been, she was a Trump supporter. She would have died for Trump, and her whole career until about a year or so ago. She started, complaining about him and getting just really, she had Trump derangement syndrome Jr. and she was just come to find out that they found out that she's got all sorts of money being thrown into her accounts that lead back to George Soros, and just, again, it's the same model as the SPLC. They pay people, somehow they get them, they either bribe them, give them money, or they say, if you don't do what we tell you, we'll give you money, and if you don't do what we tell you, we're going to say that you did this, and that, and then that's what happens, and that's how we end up with all this stupidity. And you got to watch out what you believe, because you can't believe what you need to get both sides of the story. You got to go both sides. Again, how many times they got to tell you there's the extreme right, the extreme left, and they're just fighting each other over our heads, and we're in the middle. We, the people, are in the middle going, will you knock off all this hyper-polarization, all this toxic politics, and just work for we, the people, and work together to make things right and do it together like we used to, instead of all this hyper stuff. It's just sickening and crazy. Again, it's America's birthday, and I'll cue up the next one. This is a quick 2-minute video about PragerU. Has a whole site. Go to PragerU and look at some of this stuff as they celebrate and highlight some of the history of our country. Okay, and it's similar to what's going on here. It's a great concept. So let it rip whenever you can.
It is one thing to learn cursive and read the Declaration of Independence, as every student should, I think. But it is another to grasp why 56 men risked everything for what it said, and to love as they did in a way that inspires our sacrifice.
When we were chatting with Marissa and the PragerU team and talking about how we could celebrate our 250th anniversary of our country, we thought, how fun would it be to have a museum right here in the Eisenhower Executive Office building? And when Marissa walked the hallways with us, she said, well, Does it have to just be the pictures? Couldn't we do some videos? We now are excited to launch today the Founders Museum, 56 signers of the Declaration, 20 key events of the American Revolution, and 6 ladies of the Revolution. And PragerU has been working diligently on creating videos, and when you use that QR code, you get to view the amazing pictures come to life telling their own stories.
From now on, we are going to remember our nation's history, and it's really going to matter. And we're not going to let anybody have a nation with amnesia, certainly not America.
Patriotic education does not mean propaganda to produce blind allegiance to the government. The patriotism of the Revolution was the opposite of blind allegiance. Real patriotic education means that just as our founders loved and honored America, so we should honor them, while deeply learning and earnestly debating still their ideas. That's what this Founders Museum is intended to do. It's a place where every American can connect with the courage and conviction that built our nation. Thank you so much for celebrating with us this new symbol of our love for America.
Again, PragerU did a great job, and again, they kind of showed you some of the AI videos of the founding fathers, and it's just great. They show them their own portraits, and then they come to life, and they're saying exactly what their real documents said, the truth, not what the fake media will tell you the founding fathers are the most hateful people in the world and they're godless pagans. No, they're not. They're God-fearing, freedom-loving people that set a foundation for us to live the way we're living now. And if we don't get back to our roots and basic foundation of good moral living, then it's over. No one has the right to do what's wrong, okay? That's simple. It's just that simple. Okay, so I really wish you'd go visit PragerU. I do have another show on this cable network. It's called A Republic Always, which I did play 25 minutes, though, all those PragerU videos of the founding fathers who signed the great stuff. It's just great stuff. All right, so yeah, I'm so far behind, it's pathetic. I got 4 minutes left, even less. We've come from, the founding fathers and the patriots, the Minutemen, they put their life, liberty, and the families on line for our freedoms today. And so we need to just get with the program, people. So we're celebrating. I got the 2 flags here. 250 years of freedom. We need to, get back into the spirit of Yay America. And I even have a little, I forget what the bunting. The bunting, okay? So, yep. America's a great place to live. Everybody's fighting to get in. And, oh, by the way, if you go to a socialist communist country, remember Ronald Reagan, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Yeah, they have to build walls around communist countries to keep people in because they want to get the heck out because of the violence, hate, and murderous treachery, tyranny, the oppression, and just the inhumane things that happen that are illegal, and it's pathetic. Pathetic. So America has to build walls around the country to keep people out because everybody wants to come in and ruin it. It's like they're demeaning Elon Musk because he just became a trillionaire, the first trillionaire, and they said he's stealing all the money from the people. No, he's not. He's creating all these companies and jobs, and people that are working for him now are millionaires. That's the whole concept of capitalism. You work and work and work, you build and build, and you make money, and then you need people to help you make money, and you're hiring people. That's how it works. What's the alternative? Oh, communism and socialism? You work your butt off, and then you give it to the people that aren't working. That's what socialism is. All right, God bless us. God have mercy on us all. Okay, you know what? Let's put up picture number 4. We'll close up. I think I can squeeze it in here. Picture number 4. Again, it's very, very simple. No matter how you look at history from the beginning of time to the end of time, it's always been good versus evil. Rhino Republicans always say, well, you got to vote for the least of 2 evils. Well, you know what? When you vote for the least of 2 evils, you get evil. It's still evil. We need real, true grit men, magnanimous to do what's right, to be elected. Come on, put the picture back up. And so because of that, God has a plan for your life. The enemy has a plan for your life. Be ready for both. Just be wise enough to know which one to battle and which one to embrace, because that's what's happening right now. We are, rapidly approaching the end times, and I mean, and that's probably why they're coming up with all this UFO stuff, because when the Bible predicts that when Jesus comes, all the Christians and believers will be taken up into the clouds with God, and then he'll come down and deal with all the infidels. But so Satan has got his plan to it's the UFOs, or the aliens came and took all those the evil haters. Good night. God bless America. Party down. See you next month.